focusing on policy issues. And we will have a half day of very, very interesting panels, but we wanted to sort of give you a quick background about what we've been doing here to Professor Ahluwalia and Mr. Ramadorai. There has been, over the last 2 days, a meeting of around 100 leading researchers from around the world focusing on this overlooked issue of labor markets and employment issues in developing countries. And part of the effort that ICRIER and the World Bank have been doing over the last 7 years is to try and bring together a community of researchers to focus on this overlooked issue rather than the usual instincts that they have of working just on labor market issues in the industrialized countries. It is our tradition in the third day to actually have a policy forum, a series of debates. So we've heard a lot of the research. What does this actually mean? How does it apply? What do we actually have to do? And that's why we are very fortunate to have with us those of you who are here today who will take part of the panel. It's going to be relatively informal. It's deliberately kept small rather than the very large conference. And it's about engaging. I should warn you, though, that we are being live streamed on Facebook. So there is a broader audience than the ones who are just present in this room. So on behalf of the World Bank, I want to welcome all of you, but especially Professor Ahluwalia and Mr. Ramadorai, as well as the panelists in the panels to come. But let me hand over to Stefano Scarpetta, who will speak on behalf of ICRIER as well, and the OECD.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Arup. Let me say a big welcome to this third day of this event on the Policy Forum. I'm extremely glad to have Dr. Ahluwalia with us today. And I just want to say, also on behalf of all the participants, how much we appreciate the close interaction we had over the previous 2 days. I think it was an interesting conference because we share a lot of the research that goes on in many countries, but I think we have also very good interaction with the Indian experts, the Indian authorities, and so on. This policy forum is really to go down into the policy on one fundamental issue, that is how to give better opportunity to young people, how to foster entrepreneurship for them. And I think we have 3 fantastic panels today. We really want to go into what could be done, what are the lessons could be learned from other countries, what are the key issues in India, and to what extent this cross-fertilization of experiences across countries could help the process that's to be done in each individual country. It is a great pleasure for me to have you with us, Dr. Ahluwalia. Let me say just a few words to introduce our chair, and then we move on to the first panel. As you all know, Dr. Ahluwalia is the chairperson of the Board of Governors of the ICRIER. She has an impressive CV. She was awarded the Padma Bhushan by the President of India in 2009. She held several senior positions in different councils and committees. She is the vice chairperson of the Global Development Network. She received a BA from the Calcutta University, an MA from the Delhi School of Economics, and a PhD from the MIT. We are extremely pleased for this collaboration with ICRIER throughout this process, building to put together this conference, and we are very glad to have you with us today to chair the first panel. So, Isha, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano, and a very good morning. I must thank Stefano, Arun, and Rajat from ICRIER for bringing all of you here and organizing this conference, which is on such an important issue that there can be no 2 ways of thinking about it. We need employment-intensive development, and we need to make policies that make it happen. And I have to say that there couldn't be a better person than Mr. Ramadorai for us this morning to start our deliberations on the policy forum. Mr. Ramadorai is a private sector doyen, leader, who has led one of our finest and oldest, largest software companies in the Tata Group. He He's on the board of a number of Tata companies, other boards, continues to be vice chairman of TCS, and we have actually hijacked him. This is a public-private partnership where the Prime Minister has wisely decided to use his expertise on skill development, on precisely the issues that this conference has focused on. I must make a personal apology that I could not be here on the last 2 days, even though I think it's one of the most important subjects that I really should be learning about. But I am certain that you have made suitable videos and other things through which I would learn, and I will tell you why I feel it's very important and I missed it. I happen to be in Andhra Pradesh in Hyderabad doing a workshop on the challenges of urbanization in India, and we had commitment from the Chief Minister who was going to be attending, so it was difficult by the time I learnt about your conference for me to change. Now, working on urbanization, it is very clear to us in India that if we are going to move from 377 million population in urban areas today to 600 million by 2031, and if we have 50% of our population below the age of 25, and since we are at that sweet spot in our demographic transition where working age population as percentage of total population will continue to rise until 2040, and even then it will begin to taper off only mildly, whereas this change is happening in China beginning 2010 and in Brazil beginning 2020. So India is really very favorably placed to exploit the opportunities that are coming its way, but it's by no means an inevitability. This is something, if we do not prepare ourselves for reaping this dividend, it could actually be a demographic disaster with all its implications for law and order, violence, what have you. Now, how do we convert this demographic opportunity into demographic dividend? We in India for a long time have prided on the fact that we have a large pool of scientists, engineers, skilled people, but a growth rate of 8+% per annum for 10 years was enough to tell us that we may have been very well placed for 5.5% growth. But if we have raised our ambition to grow at 8+% per annum of GDP, then we have a huge deficit of skills that will be needed, of education that will be needed, and that's precisely why the government has been very engaged by setting up a National Skill Development Council, by using public-private partnership to see that the interventions are at the right level. And I don't want to take away from, really the pearls of wisdom that you're going to hear from Mr. Ramadorai himself, but I would say this much, that we economists for a long time have talked about need for flexibility in the labor market. And I think that need remains, and we need to do a whole lot of things to see that hiring and firing becomes easier, working conditions become better, etc. But the other side of the coin is that we also need social protection for those who get dislodged as you go through, as you become more market oriented, as there is cyclical ups and downs. You need to put in place policies for social protection, especially in an economy which has only 15% of its labor force that is organized. And even there are differences. Some would say to you it's even less than that. So given all these, I think what is very heartening today is that there were many in India who didn't think that it was possible for us to grow above 6%. Their ambition was limited to 6. Today, by unleashing all the growth and the potential of the private sector, what we have shown is that India is capable of growing at 8% per annum, but it is not an autopilot. That policies of the right kind, you have to have social protection in place. And the challenge today is that even when we grew at 8% per annum, the employment growth was not so much. How do we make our growth employment intensive? How do we use a resource, which is really an asset for us? And I think for that, I really am very glad that you have chosen, you could not have chosen a better person than Mr. Ramadorai. So I will not take more of your time, but turn to Mr. Ramadorai to speak on this.
Thank you. Chairperson of the ICRIER, Mrs. Ahluwalia, Mr. Arup Banerjee, Mr. Stefano Scapita, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Now the topic facilitating youth transition into productive wage or self-employment, something which is very dear and close to all of us. And any discussion about India's youth essentially must start by looking at the scale which we are talking about to contextualize our demographics relative to the rest of the world. We are, as you all know, are the world's second most populous country and the largest democracy with over a sixth of the world's population. Now when you look at our year 2025, we will become the most populous country, surpassing China. Moreover, as has been estimated by the World Bank, we are one of the few countries of the world where the working age population would be far in excess of those who will be no longer able to work, which means in 2020, the average Indian would be only about 29 years old, compared with 37 in China and the US, and about 45 in West Europe and about 48 in Japan. This age advantage for India is expected to continue for at least 3 decades till 2040, as Ishar also mentioned. Along this window of opportunity for India, the global economy is expected to witness a skilled manpower shortage to the extent of about 56 million by the year 2020. Thus, the demographic dividend in India needs to be exploited not only for the domestic opportunities, but can also cater to the skilled manpower requirements outside India. Beyond doubt, we all agree that our youth power is one of the most important assets for economic development. India's demographic dividend is a one-time window of opportunity that we believe cannot be missed. Failing is not an option, for that would be a national disaster. And almost 40% of India's workforce has received no formal training. Thus, a large section of India's population is virtually unemployable or can function essentially as unskilled workers. The other side of the situation is that when you look at the Indian industry, it's definitely facing a shortage of skilled labor despite the bulge in the workforce. The numbers are there, but the appropriateness is the question. This shortage is affecting the economy across both the manufacturing and service sectors. For example, if you looked at just the construction sector, on which 6% of the country's workforce depends for livelihood, it's facing a 30% labor shortage. Rough back of the envelope calculations indicate that addressing the skill gap shortage in the construction sector alone could add about $20 billion to the Indian economy. So that's just one sector, the construction sector, which I wanted to highlight. It's therefore not possible for me to overemphasize the importance of skill development and education in ensuring the continuance of India's growth story and to facilitate essentially the youth transition to productive employment. There's a threefold challenge that our policy needs to address. That's what I want to talk about. One is the skilling of the new entrants to the workforce. Second is the upskilling of workers for higher or new skills so that they become relevant and they continue on the employment. And third, recognizing informal on-the-job training of existing workers. The last is especially important given that 92% of the workforce, Indian labor market, is unorganized. So now, where are the jobs? Starting from the demand side, it's very critical to anticipate where the future jobs should be created. Now, it's well understood there will be a growing shift from the agriculture to the manufacturing and service sectors. And when you look at a recent McKinsey survey, highlights that this phenomenon will result in an increased share of demand for medium-skilled workers. Therefore, it's vital to upskill low-skilled workers to the next level. And conventional wisdom tells us that service sector does not create the quantum of blue-collar jobs which the manufacturing does. So with the increased efficiency through automation, high-end manufacturing processes are essentially becoming less manpower dependent than a decade ago. Therefore, labor-intensive manufacturing sectors such as textiles, gems, and jewelry should be looked at more closely. And when you look at the Reserve Bank of India also noted recently, our country needs to focus on manufacturing in order to achieve a GDP growth of more than 6.5%, and 8% is more a number that we need to aim for at a minimum. In recognition of this need, one of the key objectives of the national manufacturing policy has been to increase the rate of job creation in manufacturing to create 100 million jobs by 2025. In fact, we were with the National Manufacturing Council yesterday and also the Planning Commission, understanding how this bottom-up 100 million jobs are going to come from. They took all the industries and then the demand side and they worked through a framework using some external consultants, and they came to about 70 million, which can be definitely absorbed in the manufacturing sector alone as they see. So it's not some wishful dream where somebody has coined this 100 million number. Well, it's a very catchy slogan, but realistically it's certainly possible. That's the message I want to leave. The focus on infrastructure creation will generate jobs. For example, if you looked at simply a 500 megawatt unit of thermal power plant, this would require manpower of around 4,500 to 4,600 when we met with the people who put these manufacturing power generation capabilities. A large 100-bed hospital with an outpatient emergency and care centers would require a staff of about 1,500. Just yesterday I came across a big announcement by a state government which has signed an MOU with 12 companies at a total investment of over 20,000 crores with the promise of 1 lakh or 136,000 jobs. All these jobs would require sector and skill-specific trained workforce, not just in urban areas but in small towns. So that's where the potential is. It's estimated that for providing gainful employment to India's young population, the country needs to create about 1 to 1.5 crore jobs per year for the next decade. And the large businesses in India, both in public and private sector, will not be able to generate employment at such a large scale. Therefore, large-scale entrepreneurship and new areas of employability such as paramedics, paralegal assistants and green workforce will need to be focused on. Entrepreneurship that is local, serves local needs, such as frugally engineered products and services would simultaneously create local jobs and increase the standard of living of a vast number of Indians subsisting at the very bottom of the pyramid. Entrepreneurship is certainly not a purely spontaneous process and can be nurtured only through a carefully designed ecosystem. Access to funds, fallback options on failure, aptitude to taking risks are to be cultivated, which is against our DNA. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology, an institution that I went to, serves as a good example. Between 2000 and 2006, MIT graduates started more than 5,800 companies, And according to a study, companies started by MIT alumni now bring in combined revenue of nearly $2 trillion. To further encourage this culture of entrepreneurship, it started that Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship that enables students from all disciplines in MIT to come together essentially to brainstorm ideas, provides expert mentorship, courses in entrepreneurship, office space, and networking opportunities. They also have entrepreneurship competitions where the winners are awarded seed startup funds and mentorship by the best in business. India can learn a lot from this approach and formulate such programs for our colleges, universities, and MBA schools. The focus, however, would have to be tailored to the Indian context and the traditional strengths on disruptive innovation to come up with low-cost products and services that can serve our population and their unique needs. By adopting this twin approach of leveraging traditional as well as new areas of employability, along with an active focus on providing a suitable environment for entrepreneurial thinking, this will be able to create sufficient jobs to absorb our large youth population. Now let me look at the supply side. Looking at the supply side, current jobs are not necessarily where the youth are, which means where they are and where the jobs are, there's a mismatch. The differential development patterns among states leads to demand and supply mismatch. This is a big cause of the labor migration. Over 30% of the total population are internal migrants, of which more than 40% moved for work and employment related reasons. States where skill development is urgently required are regions with a large number of uneducated youth with far less access to education and jobs. So this mismatch is very visible. Skill development programs like those of the Ministry of Rural Development are therefore looking at enhancing livelihood opportunities locally. Others like SEVA, an NGO, are providing entrepreneurship training for employment near women's homes. We are working with the Ministry of Youth Affairs and the Tata Institute of Social Sciences to transform the National Service Scheme, which runs in colleges, to provide job-oriented skill training to college youth that enhances their employability. When it comes to migratory youth, it has been observed that there is a high level of attrition post-training, especially amongst them. Often this can be addressed through provision of economical boarding and housing and health facilities. State governments and industry must work towards developing youth hostels. At present, this is not even being thought about, unfortunately. So the result, they just drop out and go back. The other day we were in interior Madhya Pradesh and we saw some kids who were trained on the construction sector, but they came back from Andhra Pradesh where they had gone. When we asked them, not only was the boarding and lodging, but also made a simple comment that there they give us only rice and we are used to wheat. So they came running back to Madhya Pradesh where wheat is their staple diet. Another kind of support that youth need is of easy financing options to fund their training. To address this issue, the Honorable Prime Minister's National Council on Skill Development set up a committee under my chairmanship for drafting a policy on making skills training eligible for credit support. As a result, the Indian Banks Association has approved a model loan scheme for vocational education and training and circulated it to the member banks for adoption and implementation. The scheme facilitates easy access to loans for vocational training courses with lenient repayment norms, including a long moratorium on interest payments and zero collateral requirements. Another initiative that I focused on is exemption of vocational training courses from service tax, thereby reducing the financial burden associated with getting skilled. Despite these initiatives, considerable obstacles remain. A migrant worker from UP, for example, would find it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to obtain a loan for training in Mumbai. Going forward, improved coverage and obtaining and registration under the Aadhaar scheme might considerably reduce the scale of this problem, but I am afraid that it will continue to remain a pertinent issue over the next few years. When searching for answers to industry needs and skill gaps, we need to simultaneously consider meeting the aspirations gap of the youth. The aspirational quotient of job seekers and the youth in particular goes beyond the economic value alone of a job. To include its social value too is important. Preference for higher education, even if it may not lead to direct employment, or preference to office jobs in, say, IT or accounting, are typical examples of a predetermined mindset. The mindset against vocational streams calls for an attitudinal shift of society at large. And India is not alone in this. Singapore overcame this problem very successfully by making very huge investments in creating world-class infrastructure that is high-tech and high-touch. And some governments improve social perception of professions and related skill programs by use of influencers such as television celebrities to make the case for skilled trades being important and essentially rewarding careers. Master Chef, for instance, is a popular program that has made chef an aspirational profession. Such mindsets are often because of an information gap. The youth in small towns and villages are not aware of the emerging opportunities in India. They do not have access to career guidance and counseling that would help them weigh available options and make informed decisions. While providing this information to make vocational education attractive to India's youth, it's also essential to chalk out a career ladder, enabling reskilling and upskilling of workers throughout their careers. When the value proposition of upward mobility is accepted by the youth, they will be more forthcoming to take it up. So a lot of work needs to be done in this. Some innovators have started community radio networks in local languages for job awareness and interactive programs for skill queries. However, there has been no nationwide effort. We are working towards piloting a digital platform that provides labor market information to prospective and current job seekers, including profiling of different jobs in skilled trades, job information like skills it requires, wages, etc., and access to live help and links to local training listings. To bring an element of pride, industry bodies such as CII are promoting events such as the World Skills Competition, which go a long way in recognizing and rewarding talent, and I am encouraging the hosting of such events in India as well. Putting together a domestic league will not only make India more globally competitive, but will recognize the work of people excelling in different professions and rewarding them publicly. Again, multiple channels like the TV, radio, print, local languages, etc. could be used to showcase the local heroes. Clearly, there are no simple answers, be it job creation, matching youth aspiration, challenges posed by labor migration, financing of training, or then ensuring upward mobility. So all of them are very, very critical issues. The question is, what role can different stakeholders play to facilitate youth transition to productive employment, be it the government, private, non-government entities, and we as individuals. Now let me touch upon the role of government. Government has a very crucial role to ensure training is inclusive and provides opportunities who may not be able to afford such trainings, and to those for whom the opportunity costs of acquiring such training could be very high. The 2009 National Policy on Skill Development laid the institutional structure for skill development in the country at various levels. The three-tier institutional structure consists of the PM's National Council on Skill Development, the National Skills Development Coordination Board, and the National Skills Development Corporation. The Council and Coordination Board help lay down the overall broad policy, financing and governance models and strategies relating to the skill development. The National Skills Development Corporation, on the other hand, is a public-private partnership set up to catalyze the setting up of large-scale, for-profit sustainable vocational institutions in the country by encouraging private sector participation and providing low-cost funding for training capacity. At the state level too, all states have established skill development missions in mission mode as umbrella bodies for fueling all skills-related work. The government is a major source of funding for skill development initiatives. For the year 2012-13, it is estimated that over 5,000 crores will be spent about 17 ministries and departments on skill development through different vocational training programs. Many reforms are also underway. A desirable national skills qualification framework, issues pertaining to certification and assessment, amendments to the Apprenticeship Act, and the point labor reforms which Ishar also talked about, debates relating to the desirable degree of decentralization and so on are all underway as we speak. For instance, on the educational reforms front, the central ministries and the state governments are working jointly to develop and implementing a skills framework to facilitate nationally standardized and acceptable international comparability of qualifications with multiple entry and exit points. Similarly, Ministry of Human Resource Development is planning to start community colleges on the model of US with focus on short-term courses. Some Indian states have initiated programs. For instance, the government of Kerala has started the Additional Skills Enhancement Program and Additional Skills Acquisition Program in government schools and colleges. The Additional Skills Enhancement Program is targeted for workers who wish to upgrade their skills through short-term courses, and the Additional Skills Acquisition Program would provide existing students with the option to acquire vocational education. Together, the programs aim to chart a career path for workers, allowing a system of multi-entry and exit from the education and training system on one hand, and on the other, linking the formal and vocational systems of education. Given the ambitious target of skilling 500 million that we have set for ourselves, one approach would be segmentize effort into more manageable, tangible, microcosmic worlds at specific geographical and sectoral requirements. Some words are tongue twisters. Adopting a cluster-based approach is one such option, especially for the MSMEs, the micro, small and medium enterprises. According to the latest census, there are about 2.6 crore micro, small and medium enterprises in our country. The skill requirement of SMEs is far different from large industries. For example, a small business would need a network administrator rather than an IT engineer, a multitasking office assistant rather than a receptionist. To serve these needs, we need to start community colleges with such clusters or start vocational education in schools. The government could play a facilitator by creating common training facilities which would otherwise be too costly for them to tackle individually. Similarly, different ministries have planned mega clusters, leather parks, textile parks, or IT parks. The future skilling requirement should be forecast and training pipeline facilitated into the project right from the initial stages. Now let me talk about the role of industry, having spoken about the government. As a key stakeholder, industry has time and again voiced a concern on lack of job-ready people. Several large companies have started in-house training initiatives. However, this is unviable for others. What is viable is the apprenticeship model, essentially earn as you learn. This is a highly under-leveraged model. Currently, service sector is not a part of the apprenticeship program, and therefore a policy intervention is urgently required. Industry is best placed to develop sector-specific skill competency standards and qualifications. This is being enabled by setting up a sector skill councils, or SSCs as we call it. They are mandated to develop the national occupation standards for different job roles across industries so that measurable criteria could be designed for determining employability that would benefit both the job giver and the job seeker. Bridging the gap between the industry and academic and vocational training system is another area for industry engagement. Adoption of the industrial training institutes, or ITIs as they are called, partnering in community colleges, providing faculty in universities that offer job-related training and recognition and provision of upskilling of employees to suit dynamic needs of industry are ways they can actively participate, namely the industries. Technology can play a very critical role in managing the skilling ecosystem, especially in a system as complex as the Indian system, with over 20 central ministries and 35 state governments and union territories involved in skilling. India's IT industry can work with the government to create innovative delivery mechanism for training, including leveraging the national rural broadband network, where the 25,000 panchayats through a national optical fiber network are going to be connected. The rollout has already started, and the universal service obligation funds are being used for the same. Technology-based delivery models for training can exploit economies of scale and reach reach larger target audiences given a fixed investment. Remotely located trainers can now communicate with students in technology-enabled e-classrooms. While the development of web-based interactive content has also reduced the requirement for constant engagement with trainers. It's thus eminently possible for high-quality training and content to be available in the most isolated areas or locations, which will reduce the pressure on constrained physical resources and bring skills to one's doorstep. This model of delivery will have a greater role to play in emerging economies, where penetration of internet network and technology is essentially increasing at a very rapid pace. Another key role that technology will play is in managing this ecosystem through what we call as a robust labor market information system and monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. An excellent example of the latter is the Ministry of Rural Development's tracking and monitoring system for its Himayat scheme in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Similar systems need to be established for all skilling initiatives to ensure that lasting outcomes are achieved. The system will also facilitate better decision making through improved access to information essentially pertaining to the labor markets. Now let me come to the conclusion. Last but not the least, it is self-evident that with this huge responsibility and opportunity in our hands, along with large scales we are seeking to achieve, given the diversity of our country, convergence of efforts at different levels will be absolutely key for successful outcomes. There will have to be the highest level of collaboration amongst the different stakeholders, the government at all levels, right from the center to the panchayats, private sector, NGOs, and individuals. All will have to try new models, new ways of working with the end vision as a unifying force. We already see different models being developed by states to come up with structures suiting to their specific requirements. For example, certain states are already following a decentralized approach to skilling. Take for instance Maharashtra, where skilling targets have been set at the district level, registration of vocational training providers, provision of funds to or at this level, and so on. So they are really decentralized. Others like Gujarat and Kerala are focusing on establishing a system that integrates the vocational and formal streams more closely. Few states like Chhattisgarh and Andhra Pradesh are vesting more power and responsibility with their skills missions in order to ensure greater convergence between the various state departments and so on. There are clearly many different models that are being experimented with, and thus it will be important to share not only the success stories among states, but also the lessons learned along the way. In conclusion, I would like to say that this is a great time to be in the skilling landscape of this country as never before, as this has received a high degree of focus and intense policy support and impetus. This conference which you are having is another step of engagement in the common direction we all wish to head in, and I am sure the subsequent session that will follow will lead to productive dialogue and explore the key issues and challenges that youth employment in India is faced with today. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Ramadorai. You've lived up to the expectations that I had laid out to the audience. We have a few minutes, so it would be nice if we can have some comments or questions from the participants, make it more interactive. So please introduce yourself for our benefit and make your question or comment brief, if I may request. I would just like to, while you're organizing yourselves to thinking on who's going to raise the hand first, I think one other point that I would like to put across here is that Mr. Ramadorai has talked about skill development and also encouraging enterprise. But another area which is associated with this whole landscape is the focus on reviewing our education curriculum to make it more real and more connected with the economic world. Because, as you know, in the past, we tended to go for ivory tower excellence. And now, it's just that one can only cover so much. So I just thought I'd also put that on the agenda. That is also very much under the government's scanner, and including courses, which you share with foreign universities, invite partnerships, have use internet for, making these curricula more real. So I just thought I'd also mention this. And with that, let me, yeah. Yes, you have a question? No? Arun.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahluwalia and Mr. Ramadorai. This was inspiring and yet daunting. So I feel that after your talk, have this mixture of feelings, because I think you laid out the challenges that are there very crisply and very clearly, but the scale of the effort that's needed makes one wonder. So it will be useful to have a conversation, because I'm sure others shared that feeling. I had two specific areas where it would be helpful to have your thoughts. One that is actually inspired, connected to Dr. Ahluwalia's point. When you talked about the new training programs, whether it be community colleges or the special training agencies, the skills development technical workshops, in our experience across the world, one of the traps that all these institutions fall into is that when they're set up, they're very responsive to the needs that exist at that moment. The professors and the faculty and the training courses are set up to meet the current needs. But as you know from your industry, these needs change year to year.
Yeah.
And faculty and courses often don't keep up. And within a decade, they become obsolete. So it will be useful to think of what sort of thinking you have in terms of changing that, so that the training needs and the training supply, it actually keeps up with the demand changes. The second question I had actually builds on your points, and I'd like you to expand a bit more about the evaluation part of it. What we have in India today is an enormous explosion of experimentation. You listed some of them, but every state I go to or every agency I talk to, there is a different initiative, all of which sounds exciting and promising. What we seem to lack, which is what other parts of the world has done, is actually rigorous evaluation, rather than sort of saying, oh, this sort of works, and the scientific rigorous evaluation that, for example, Latin America has systematically put into place into all its programs, and then having the courage to come out with what succeeded and what failed, and scaling up what succeeded and what didn't. So are there plans to have that sort of rigorous evaluation in place as well?
No, I think these are extremely relevant questions. First, your comment about being inspiring and daunting. It's a daunting task because of the scale of the problem. Now, the relevance of both the faculty as well as the content to suit the requirements of the future on a continuous basis. We do understand, and what we are trying to do is to create technology-based platforms for collaboration as much as possible. At the end of the day, the supply side where the students would get enrolled only when they are assured of a job or a potential job. So if you get all the players into the platform itself, and then at the end of the day somewhere produce a scorecard, namely these are the 10 skills that are getting the jobs, these are the 20 opportunities which may be relevant. The demand side players also participate in it by saying that what are their requirements, because unless they are part of the ecosystem, namely the industry and or entrepreneurship programs, it will be irrelevant, and that's a big danger. So technology is something with the participants. We are doing a number of workshops as we speak, where even if you take a construction sector, we have brought all the stakeholders together, namely the large builders, followed by their subcontractors, followed by the various associations, some of the academics, some of the industry demand side people who, and then had a session on this, so that what is their role and what is the changing nature of the demand that we put, and how does the academic institutions, the supply side partner, participate in it. So it has to be a continuous process across. Now coming to the evaluation, I think that is the most difficult part, because if you do not certify through a very rigorous evaluation at a level where they will be able to perform, and a wage that is linked to that kind of a performance, we are going to have a major disappointment and a major problem. This is where we are learning from any part of the world, also encouraging some of the certification agencies to partner and participate here, like for example if Pearson from the UK, in the school curriculum. We have started some pilots in Assam as an example, in the areas of retail or automotive or IT or whatever it is. Similarly with some other Swiss VET program, we are doing a couple of experiments in Maharashtra, where we used our content but used the Swiss methodology on top of it, and then connected with the Swiss companies operating in India for apprenticeship and the job enablement. Germans again, Singaporeans, like that we are trying to learn from them, but the certification, assessment, evaluation and link to the job with the right level, with the right wage is definitely very much on the radar, and we are focusing quite a bit on that. And the qualification framework and the sector skill councils, their job is with the industry participation to make sure that the competency levels, the occupation standards and independent certification are going to be essential. The only certification agency cannot be NCVT or something, but we want to bring in some of the private players also in the certification. But finally, the market forces should determine who is better than the other one.
Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Sabina Dewan. I'm director of a program called Just Jobs at the Center for American Progress, and also an AIF fellow here in India for the next 10 months. Thank you for a very stimulating presentation. I have two questions. My first question is, I was wondering if you could comment a little bit on the gender dimension of the training programs and the landscape that you laid out, both in terms of what the government is doing and what industry is doing. You cited the example of Seva that tries to create entrepreneurship and employment opportunities for women closer to their home. In my limited experience working in India, I see that women in terms of training programs are generally, especially young women, put into tailoring or beautician courses, and I wonder if they're being left behind as the nation progresses in terms of skilling its youth. That's my first question. My second question is a very, not an easy question, but a small one. You had mentioned the potential for the manufacturing sector to absorb about 100 million youth in the coming years, and I was wondering where you see the demand for the manufacturing coming from. More domestic demand, or Europe and the US, which are slowing down? Thank you.
Yeah, now to talk about the women and beyond tailoring and beauty, I think we are looking at some of the industrial training institutes which are exclusively focused on women. We are talking to some of the state governments to set up women's skilling centers in any profession, whether it is manufacturing, retail, service sectors, or locally relevant jobs in the districts in which they operate. So it's not the traditional tailoring and beauty as the only options that are available for women. The women enrollment, including in the industries, the gender diversity and the number of women in organizations, even within the Tata Group, we track this very closely. For example, the IT part of the organization has about 33-34% of the women as the total workforce, and on a population of almost 250,000 I'm talking about, so it's a very sizable number. To us, the diversity, women as part of the employment pool, not necessarily in only 2 or 3 disciplines, is very crucial, and we will certainly give the necessary focus. We have some of the AI fellows also working with us, and they are all women. So that's other.
If I may just add, if you look at today's newspapers, I forget which one because I read about 8 in the morning. One of the newspapers has the headline that in engineering courses at IITs, women are really going way ahead of men.
Correct.
And I find that when that's on the supply side, on motivation, expectation, I go to address convocations at technical universities and other universities, and I find among those who take away all the awards are like 70% women. So one, of course, is that gender dimension should be looked at, but women on their own in India are making their presence felt. So I don't need anybody's patronage to get ahead. Yeah, that's one. The other thing is, I think given the social infrastructure, which is both the family support, extended family support at critical phase of women's lives, and domestic help still being affordable, for this class, that is the major reason that women can go into the workforce. I think what we need, even if they have general skill programs, I think women will get out there and take benefit of that. Yes, there should be, and I don't think they are being typecast into any roles.
Correct.
But what we do need, I feel very important, that this is very important, is flexible modules in work spaces where you have flexible hours, you allow very high performing women performing at very high end of both industry and government to be able to step out, with a 50% engagement in those critical years when they are raising children. And I think those are things which the government is also looking at. So I just wanted to put your mind at rest that in India, on that score, we seem to be doing quite well.
No, I think it's a great comment where they are definitely for it in terms of getting into the productive workforce. And there are ample opportunities purely on merit and their willingness and the passion to excel in any discipline. Second question which you asked with regard to the demand for manufacturing and the numbers that have been come up with, is it purely domestic? The answer is absolutely yes. It is for the domestic requirements with the kind of growth we expect.
I'm Rehana Riyawala, representing Self-Employed Women's Association SEWA, and we have been working and getting your guidance a lot on the skill building initiatives of SEWA, and then the idea of your community colleges has really inspired us, because we at SEWA also believe that in order to upscale the skill building initiatives which we are doing, the master trainers who have taken the trainings from the the expert institutions in turn opens the field schools at the block level, and they in turn provides the training, and then they are being judged by the expert institutions as well. So that was also very aspiring. And the one thing which we talked about, the aspiration of the young generation, that is what at SEWA we have been feeling, that that has been leading to the de-skilling of the work, and they look towards, the work security, and the micro-entrepreneurship is not among the younger generation, so the researches and small studies needs to be done in that area as well. So I just wanted to comment on these two aspects. And May I also take the opportunity to say what you talked about, the traditional skills and all that, but then apart from the traditional skills, as you both also talked, we also focus a lot on, say, the paramedicines and nursing skills and ICTs and all that. So the vocational market-led skill building is equally important at the grassroots level as well.
No, thank you. Thank you for those comments. I think it's an organization where when you meet the entrepreneurs whom they have built, it's a remarkable story of people who have transformed themselves. They also become master trainers on their own. And the third thing was they are going into other states even though they have no language competency. But somebody asked, what do you do without a language? He says, for skilling you don't need a language, you have to do with your hands.
Please.
Thank you, Dr. Ramadorai. I'm Rita Almeida. I work for the World Bank. Thank you for a very inspiring talk. I wanted exactly to build on this point on the importance of having the right entrepreneurial skills early in life, and wanted to have your views on how early you think we should try to shape personality towards entrepreneurial activities. And also to share that at the World Bank we have followed some of these projects around the world, especially in Latin America, and also trying to do some evaluations. And one of the things that from our experience has worked well has been the close involvement of students, in this case university students, with private sector coaches. And that this involvement has actually fostered the right personality changes that you would like to see in young people to set up their own businesses. So I'd like to have your views on that. Thank you.
No, I think when we look at some of these private sector foundations in the country, where they are choosing fellows as part of the private sector foundations itself. The fellows are chosen with young graduates, whether they are undergraduate or postgraduates, and they spend at the field level 2 years, where they live with the communities, they live with their problems, and then understand and then teach them. One of the programs which they put together, which I reviewed yesterday, was the public schools, where the headmasters are being trained and facilitated by the newer set of tools by adopting the public sector, the public schools, with these kids as the facilitators as an example, and they have designed a number of tools and the techniques to upgrade the headmasters. They are also starting what we call as national headmasters certification assessment, so that the right people get onto the job at the school level itself. Then they can train the teachers and spot the talent in the students at the entrepreneurial level. Then coming out of the schools, we are looking at starting entrepreneurship MBA programs in colleges through a complete online mechanisms, whether you can scale up to the kind of numbers that requires, including startups, etc. And then linkage with small, medium enterprises that go into startup these. So it is again still an early stage where entrepreneurship to get to the kind of focus and institutional focus is being attempted. But I think it will take 3 to 5 years before we see any real results on the ground.
If I may add another factor in India today, in the vibrant decade that we have gone through, more than these micro efforts or institutional efforts at developing an approach towards entrepreneurship is the emergence of icons in the private sector.
Correct.
You know, it's the Narayan Murthis and the Azim Premjis and the Ramadorais of the world. I think today the young person coming out of college does not only see a government, academia, or a job in the financial sector as his ambition. The best and the brightest want to really make a difference by unleashing their animal spirits, and they feel that India is a happening place in spite of all the challenges. And yes, everything in India is daunting. That's the fun part of it. Huh? But what is so rewarding is to see that as you travel across the country in small towns, middle towns and all, it's the ambition of the youth and what they are even able to achieve. So I think those icons work much greater than you and me telling them that, you know, get out there, be entrepreneurial, or teach them how to. Because all of us have a bit of a risk taker in us, and when we see that there are people who've done it, it sort of, bolsters our confidence.
No, I think she made a very, very valid point, because people look up to icons. When we grew up, we looked up to industrialists or the government or the political system as the icons. Today they look up to young entrepreneurs who have made a success of themselves, or even dare to try, and then that's the most important message. Please.
Actually, I am Ashok Sahu. I am a Principal Advisor in the Planning Commission, looking after Labour, Employment and Manpower Division. Of course, I am a speaker in the next panel. Now, just one intervention regarding this gender discrimination in the matter of employment. It comes under your domain, in fact. Actually, we have got an act called the Factories Act 1948, and there is one section, Section 66, actually, which at the moment prohibits employment of women in factories during night hours. There is a proposal to amend that provision with adequate safeguards, in the sense that women will be allowed to work in factories during night time with safeguards. In fact, ma'am, it is pending consideration from 2005, because our honorable MPs, they are more concerned with that safeguard kind of thing. So what they wanted, that instead of bringing out only an isolated amendment, let the Factories Act be amended comprehensively, which is under the consideration of the Ministry of Labour and Employment. But once, and I am focusing on that particular provision, once that is amended, and when more and more women folk are getting to education, are getting trained, vocational or otherwise, if both the things come hand in hand, it will be a great step ahead for providing women work in a diversified manner, and we will be able to achieve the objective. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much for that intervention. May I? Would you like to say something in conclusion?
No, I think it has been one of the most useful, personally, a learning experience for me interacting with all of you, and thanks to Isha who has made it possible. I sincerely like to thank her. She called me about a month ago saying that will you come on the 7th of November. Without hesitation I said yes. Now I know I did not make a mistake. I really thank her for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.